Coming up on Front Porch Politics. As the snow fell in our nation's capital in early January,
I'm over here in Cannon.
we were there as two well-known new members of Congress began their work,
Did the New York guys bring this weather?
including longtime North Carolina House Speaker Tim Moore.
You kind of go from being in charge of one thing to starting over, and that's fine.
Then,
Through the testimony I've listened to over the past 3 days, I believe a new election should be called.
his 2018 election made headlines around the world. Now, 6 years later, Mark Harris returns to Washington, this time officially sworn in.
I felt vindicated the night we won the primary.
And later,
We're going to the voting booth, voting for the lesser of the two evils.
Shalane Atchison made history in 2024 as the first unaffiliated candidate for Congress in North Carolina.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
What she learned from the race and her thoughts on the future of party politics.
So a lot of our political system is really broken. And it makes me sad for our country.
Welcome to another edition of Front Porch Politics. I'm Tim Boyle, coming to you from our nation's capital, our nation's front porch, Washington, D.C. For some time, we've had thoughts of coming to Washington to follow two new members of Congress that I've known for more than 2 decades combined. However, a winter storm here has changed everything and shut Washington, D.C. down. But that did not stop Congress from working, and we were there for the beginning. We start with a man named Mark Harris.
Before we get to Mark Harris, we have to point out the weather. On our way to D.C. in early January, the signs literally warned us. By morning, snow-filled roads, big fences for security, and cold weather greeted us. January 6th security meant literally dragging a cart full of gear across Capitol Hill outside. Most of D.C. was shut down, but the presidential election certification kept the Capitol open. Thankfully, that meant our story survived as well, starting with Mark Harris.
The chair will swear in the members-elect en masse.
435 members, 219 Republicans. It's easy to blend in with so many members of Congress.
And that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office.
So much so, one North Carolina member who made international headlines,
I believe a new election should be called.
sworn in seemingly under the radar. A notorious story he wants to remain in the past as he begins to write a new chapter.
I felt vindicated the night we won the primary.
Is it one of the hardest things to do to figure out where the heck to go?
It is.
It's January 6th. Congressman Mark Harris, a Republican, just voted to certify the 2024 presidential election.
When you're there on the House floor, I don't know, it's just sort of an awe that kind of comes over you.
We're now headed back to Harris's office to sit down and talk about a wild ride that started back in 2018.
In some ways, I don't know what to call you. Reverend, Congressman. Congressman, is that good?
I go by Congressman, Pastor.
Outside of prior runs for Senate in 2014 and Congress in 2018, Harris is an outsider, spending his adult life as a pastor in Southern Baptist churches. A far cry from politics, or perhaps not.
Being a pastor can be pretty chaotic from day to day, got to be honest with you. And I certainly see what the speaker does in herding cats, and that's kind of like an incredible task that we oftentimes do in the church.
Harris represents the 8th District, although it's very similar to the old 9th District, where he ran back in 2018, a race literally now in the history books. In 2018, Harris faced off against a man named Dan McCready in the then 9th Congressional District.
In 2018, I ran against someone named Mark Harris, whose campaign committed the largest case of election fraud in modern American history.
On election night, Harris seemingly won by just 905 votes. But the State Board of Elections refused to certify the race, and reports surfaced of a Harris campaign worker named McCrae Dowlis running an illegal ballot harvesting operation in Bladen County. Harris shocked the political world when he took the stand months later.
Neither I nor any of the leadership of my campaign were aware of or condoned the improper activities that have been testified to in this hearing. Through the testimony I've listened to over the past 3 days, I believe a new election should be called.
A new election was called. Harris did not run again, and another Republican, Dan Bishop, won. 4 years later, I sat down with Harris for a podcast interview.
You know, it's the strangest thing, Tim, for
The first few years, a couple of years, I guess, and I was involved in this thing in Washington, I could not bring myself to go to the Capitol. I just couldn't.
As time passed, Harris was now defiant about his race, fully confident he did nothing wrong, even if prosecutors believe his campaign worker did.
So do you regret getting on the stand and calling for a new election today?
Yes, I do.
A year after that podcast interview, Harris decided it was time to try again,
But I'm back.
and claiming he was the victim.
In 2020, Democrats stole the election from President Trump. The year before, they did it to me.
Harris won a 6-way primary by 3 points and easily won the general election by nearly 20 points. While some were surprised he ran again, our podcast interview made it clear he was not done in politics.
I would consider it again. I certainly have not closed the door. I will say this, God opened the door, I felt like, in 2018 in a way that it had never really been opened before. Beth and I prayed about it. We felt like that we were at a place in our life that this was something we should do.
I mean, how does it feel?
I felt vindicated the night we won the primary. I felt vindicated that night because if you followed that primary closely, I mean, they pulled out everything they could.
In 2018, Harris actually attended congressional orientation, thinking he won the election, only to return home to find out the race was not over. This time, as soon as orientation ended, old memories got the best of him.
But I will tell you, when I got home from orientation, I watched myself online the full meeting of the State Board of Elections so I could actually hear and watch me be certified this time because that was absolutely, I watched it online. But when they did it, because I just wanted to hear and make sure that there were no questions.
Harris was sworn into Congress on January 3rd. We talked border and immigration, tax cuts, and social issues, debates that will play out in the coming months. But I was most curious about his thoughts on President Trump and Congress working in tandem with full Republican control.
I don't think it'll be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. Because we have the House, because we have the Senate, and because we have the White House, there is going to be a greater tendency to work together.
During our interview, in the background, you may have noticed pictures and plaques.
Medals from World War II. He was a waist gunner. This is a guy that was 6 years old when his mom died with cancer. His dad was an alcoholic, couldn't take care of him.
That man was Mark Harris's dad, a World War II vet who survived an attack and plane crash in Europe.
My dad and others were captured.
The pictures remind him of what his dad sacrificed. Sacrifices that make it possible for Harris to run for Congress and opportunities to meet presidents.
And I remember when Beth and I were standing out there by Air Force One waiting for the president to descend out, and she looked at me and she said, you know, I don't think either of our parents would ever have imagined that we would be standing here today. And she was right.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll meet up with Tim Moore, a man known as House Speaker to many of you, but now known here, just another member of Congress. Welcome back to Front Porch Politics. I'm Tim Boehm here in Washington, D.C. We are kind of profiling and following two new members of Congress that we've known for a long time in North Carolina. One of those is someone I've known largely as House Speaker Tim Moore. But now in Washington, he's just another member of Congress.
Good to see you.
His office is perhaps a tad smaller.
You kind of go from being in charge of one thing to starting over, and that's fine.
For Congressman Tim Moore, in a way, it's back to school.
So we're going to keep going straight.
But despite new halls and new faces, he's already making plenty of new friends.
Good, man. Good to see you. Everything going all right?
He's a new kid on the block in the U.S. House after running the State House. But if you know Tim Moore, chances are you know he'll be working to move up the ranks in a hurry.
What did you decide to bring up with you? How did you make
You know, just different things. So there's a gavel for all, for each of the 5 terms there.
Tim Moore set a record as the longest-serving North Carolina House Speaker. Last month, he left that spot to be sworn in by another Speaker, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson.
When we were getting sworn in, there's a picture of us on swearing-in day, and you see us both laughing. And he said, I said, Mr. Speaker, and he called me Mr. Speaker, and I said, stop that. That's your curse now, not mine.
You may be asking yourself, Why leave behind all the power in Raleigh to be just another lawmaker in Washington? Sometimes it's just time for a change.
You know, I really saw what we were able to do in North Carolina with turning around our state, and have seen those same challenges here in Washington, and want to be a part of doing that. You know, we've been given a unique opportunity with the election of President Trump, being in a majority here in the House, a majority in the U.S. Senate, to try to turn things around right now.
Tim Moore was a state lawmaker for 22 years and served as House Speaker for a record 10 years. But when new congressional maps helped clear the path to an easy victory, it was too much to pass up.
Hi, I'm Tim Moore. I want to let you know it is official. I'm running for the United States Congress.
He ran in the 14th district that includes counties west and northwest of Charlotte.
I'll fight Biden's radically bad agenda, just like I've done in North Carolina.
And he's embraced Donald Trump.
Stand with Trump and vote Tim Moore for Congress.
There are those out there, particularly critics of Republicans, that are going to say, you know, you have in charge of both chambers of Congress and the White House and largely the courts, that y'all are going to be a rubber stamp for President Trump. What do you say to that?
I don't see myself or this institution as a rubber stamp for anyone. I think that you're going to see collaboration. But frankly, it's not a situation where, you know, the president was talking about one thing and Congress was talking about another. I think we're talking about the same issues.
It's so hard at the legislature because you guys are dealing with some of those. I mean, you talk about Medicaid and taxes. It's super complicated. The process is too. It feels like it would be tenfold in Washington. What has that been like?
Things here don't move as quickly as we do back home in North Carolina. You know, there were days that you would cover where we would pass 20 bills in a day. We could get bills into a committee through a committee hearing, passed out, and passed into law within a week. Things do not work that quickly here. All right, guys, I'm going to head to the floor.
Congressman Moore took us behind the scenes to the House floor as he voted to certify the presidential election. Perhaps the biggest challenge so far with the new job, finding his way around.
Very challenging. So the way it's laid out, Tim, is there's basically, you can walk out the front door and just walk outside, which I don't recommend today. Or you can go down here to the basement and you can take these tunnels that go everywhere.
Sure enough, the tunnels take us under the Capitol, an underground highway of activity.
Hey guys, how are y'all? Did the New York guys bring this weather?
It's here we see the Tim Moore I've known for 2 decades.
There he is. That's my North Carolina guy. What's going on, big guy?
He thrives on making connections and helped him rise to power. Watch as 2 men come running past us. In an instant, he recognizes who they are and makes contact.
You South Dakota guys, y'all don't move slow at all.
And the fast pace in the tunnel could reach the House floor as well. In our time in Washington, you could sense an urgency among Republicans. They control Congress and the White House. But President Trump only has 4 years, and midterms are already lurking next year.
When it comes to the tax policy, for example, the tax cuts that are in place right now, they are set to expire this year unless we renew those. So we need to have those, and we need to do those soon so that businesses and individuals have certainty when it comes to that. So yes, is there an urgency? Is there an urgency because of fear that we won't be in the majority? No, not that. I think if we keep the promises that we've made to the voters, we'll not only maintain this majority, but we'll expand our majority.
Including huge promises on immigration and deportations.
Republicans are going to be judged by what the promises were in 2024.
So in terms of the repatriation process, I think that's one that we're going to have to look to see what that means, how that's able to be done.
More than anything, he swears up and down he's ready to start over as a rank-and-file lawmaker and get to work.
I'm ready to be a legislator again, to really work on policy and take those deep dives. And so I'm going to have that opportunity. Of course, managed to get the committee assignment that I really wanted in financial services, which is going to be key to so many things.
By the way, before we left, we had to show you one more thing.
Yeah, that's the possum that came from the Speaker's office.
That's right, a possum. It was a fixture in his North Carolina office and arrived there after a fiery debate over a New Year's Eve tradition in Clay County where a live possum was dropped in a plastic box as midnight arrived.
So we had to pass several versions of the Possum's Right to Work Act so that they could continue this little celebration.
But the possum story lives on as Congressman Moore tries to move up the ranks in a new home as well.
We're going to take one last break. When we come back, we head back to North Carolina to talk with someone who lost the election but gained a whole lot more. Welcome back to Front Porch Politics. I'm Tim Boehm. We're here in Washington, D.C., but for our last story, we head back to North Carolina to meet up again with Shalane Etchison. If you watch this show, remember she was North Carolina's first ever unaffiliated candidate for Congress. She lost that race, but you could say she gained a whole lot more.
On this rural road with a landscape painted with horse farms and southern pines, a story of political independence.
I think there's something in people's hearts they're feeling like they don't really belong in one of the two parties.
A story of a woman making history, even in defeat.
What we talked in June
Yeah.
timeframe? Yeah, so that summer.
We have so much to catch up on since we last talked. We first met Shalane Etchison last June. Her background as a Harvard grad and her fight to be one of the first women in combat caught her eye.
It was not fair, and I actually thought that was pretty un-American.
She hoped that story would help her beat the odds in a new arena, politics.
My name is Shalane Etchison, and I'm a proud Army combat veteran.
Last March, Etchison officially announced her run for office.
Now I'm running for Congress in North Carolina's 9th District as an independent.
She was the first unaffiliated candidate for Congress ever on a North Carolina ballot. She would run in the 9th District, squaring off against powerful incumbent Republican Richard Hudson and Democrat Nigel Bristow.
We're going to the voting booth, voting for the lesser of the two evils. I want to go to the voting booth and enthusiastically vote for someone who inspires me.
Thank you very much. Wow.
But as Donald Trump celebrated victory on election night, Etchison lost. Richard Hudson won with 56%. The Democrat got 38%. And Etchison landed in third with just under 6%. Last June, Etchison knew she faced an uphill battle.
I think there's something in people's hearts they're feeling like they don't really belong in one of the two parties, but the system that we've had has been in place for so long that I think it's going to take some time for more people, more candidates like me to step up and actually be a true unaffiliated option.
She remains optimistic, but the rigors and reality of a lost campaign have set in.
A lot of our political system is really broken. The people deserve representatives who are going to be able to have the ability to genuinely be themselves and not have to play so deeply into these political games.
So here's the Southern Pines post office.
Unlike political parties, to get on the ballot, unaffiliated candidates must get signatures from 1.5% of registered voters, roughly 7,500 people. Etchison spent months making it happen, but she's not totally against the idea.
The amount of money that I had to allocate to that and time and effort, it just already puts you at a handicap right out the gate. So I think the bar needs to be lessened, but that the bar needs to be raised a little bit for people who are still running with the parties, because anyone can just, pay your filing fee and then get on there. The data, everything shows that so many people are fed up with the same old two choices, the same old partisan politics, not having results, the division that's being sowed. It's not good for our country, and people are tired of it. And when you talk to them, yes, they love the idea of having some alternatives, some more independent voices in there, people that are going to be prioritizing them, not the parties. But then when given the choice, the option, that's not necessarily how people are casting their ballots. I don't really have a great answer as to why. So looking at potentially future opportunities running against a candidate, the conditions would either have to be like we talked about, I'm going to be either rich, famous, or a two-person race, and then maybe we'll do the unaffiliated again. But more likely than not, a path to victory would include running with one of the two parties.
On Election Day, Etchison posted this picture, the Constitution in one hand and the future in her other hand. That was late spring. By Election Day, she was nearly 8 months pregnant.
Oh, it's okay, baby.
This is Colton.
Yes, this is Colton.
Look at the bow tie.
He got dressed up for today.
By the time we met again in January, little Colton had just arrived.
He got the bow tie for Tim.
During early voting, she still spent every day pounding the pavement, pushing for votes, with a little extra motivation in mind.
Having a child, you're like, we've got to make sure that this train stays on the tracks, right? We don't want to pass down unnecessary burdens to the next generation. You know, we gotta make sure that we hand our country, hand off something better to the next generation than what we received it.
Despite losing the race, a happy ending to an historic run for office, literally putting a bow on it.
Continued best wishes for Shalane and her entire family. All right, we got to hit the road and head back to North Carolina and find more incredible stories about incredible people in the great state of North Carolina and beyond. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.